Haruto Amakawa is a useless orphan like you. He is seen standing outside his family home, but he's actually moving out of the suburbs and into the city. His childhood crush, Maharu, is in tears. He tells her to shut the fuck up but promises that when he's older, he will return. We then find a grown Haruto on a bus heading back from university. A young girl on the bus stares at him, but before anything more can come of that, the bus shakes violently. Out of nowhere, Mr. Train Coin appears and promptly transports everyone to another world. As they're getting full iSky experience, Haruto experiences another flashback of Maharu. Moments later, we meet Ryo, a filthy, downtrodden boy who has awakened in this new world. He's sweating profusely and smells like dog. Upon waking, Ryo is overwhelmed by the sudden influx of unfamiliar memories from another person. He even forgets his own name and starts calling himself Haruto Amakawa, though he has no clue who this Haruto guy is or why his dreams are dominated by him. He vaguely recalls a bus and a grandfather who trained him in martial arts, but it's all muddled in his mind. Three men burst into the room where Ryo is lying and are surprised to find him still alive after a terrible fever. They were on the verge of burying him, but now they just want him to leave because he smells like straight ass. They beg him to find some deodorant and a breath mint. Ryo heads outside, looking for food among the fruit plants as no one is willing to give him any. More flashbacks plague Ryo's mind, and he remembers Haruto as a university student from Japan who was hit by a train while on a bus. This modern Japan and its civilization are bewildering to him. He realizes he's just Ryo, a slum dweller with a burning desire for revenge for his mother's murder. He recalls a conversation with his mother about visiting his grandparents' homeland, which was cut short when she was killed by an assassin. Since that day, revenge has been his sole motivation. As Ryo wallows in his tragic memories, a group of noble girls approach him. They're looking for a cute, bubbly, purple-haired girl who has gone missing. Ryo denies having seen anyone matching that description. The girls comment on his foul smell and keep their distance, with one older girl, Vanessa, being particularly rude. Celia, another girl in the group, apologizes for Vanessa's behavior and politely inquires if Ryo has any information. Ryo still doesn't know anything and advises them against going to the slums in their fine clothes. The girls consider changing into more appropriate attire before heading to the slums. Before leaving, Celia uses a magic detection spell and discovers magical energy within Ryo's body. Vanessa asks if Celia did something to him, but Celia explains that Ryo seems to have some sort of magical spirit chronicle, which is very strong. Although only Ryo can see the blue flames surrounding him, the girls conclude that their missing friend must be in the slums. They thank Ryo and leave him behind. Celia gives Ryo a bag of silver coins so heavy he can barely count them, and he wears it around his neck like a pendant. As Ryo rushes home to share his good fortune, a masked assassin ambushes him. The assassin's blade strikes the bag of coins, saving Ryo's life. Terrified, Ryo cowers in a corner, ready to meet his end. Suddenly, a mysterious pink-haired beauty appears in spirit form. She calls Ryo by his Japanese name, Haruto, and offers to quickly teach him the basics of magical combat. As Haruto helps Ryo tap into his past training, he starts to remember his martial arts skills and uses them to fend off the assassin. Despite the assassin's powerful magic, Ryo unleashes a mighty kick, knocking the knife from the thug's hand. The hooded thug, trembling in fear, attempts a final strike, but Ryo uses a powerful technique to defeat him. Shocked by his own strength, Ryo discovers that the assassin has already taken out the other men in the room, leaving him alone. He hears movement from the brown sack brought by the men earlier and finds Princess Flora, the very girl the noble ladies were searching for. Flora explains she was captured for ransom and needs Ryo's help to return to the castle. She promises that if he succeeds, her father will reward him handsomely and even knight him. Ryo, though confused by the royal jargon, agrees to help Flora. As they make their way outside, they are confronted by the other noble girls, who accuse Ryo of kidnapping Flora. They berate him and arrest him for his betrayal, ignoring his explanations. The nobles take him to the castle to answer for his alleged crimes. Inside the castle, Ryo meets Charles, the Lord Commander and the king's first sword. Charles relishes the opportunity to humiliate a poor slum boy, and, despite Ryo's protests of innocence, he proceeds to beat him mercilessly. Meanwhile, Princess Flora, having awakened, informs Celia and the maids that Ryo is not guilty and that he was the one who rescued her. She demands that Ryo be brought to her immediately. Celia goes to the dungeons and is horrified by Ryo's condition. She chastises Charles for his actions and insists that Ryo be treated with respect. Charles, feigning compliance, orders Rio to be released. Celia then heals Rio with a magic spell. After waking up in a bed in the Beltrum kingdom, Rio asks Celia what will happen to him. Celia tells him he will have an audience with the king, who wants to personally thank him. Rio is stunned but unsure of how to properly address a king. Celia helps him learn the royal etiquette. A short while later, Rio has a slick back and enters the throne room. He earns admission to the Beltrum Royal Academy of Magic, marking the beginning of his new life. Celia cautions Rio that most students come from privileged backgrounds, and he'll likely face relentless bullying. Rio, however, responds nonchalantly, acknowledging his place in the social hierarchy. Celia opens the door to his new classroom, and as Rio is introduced as a student from the slums, whispers ripple through the class. The students are not thrilled about having a kid from the projects who smells like Satan's asshole in their midst. However, since Rio had rescued Princess Flora, the king personally ensured his admission into the academy. The reception Rio receives is chilly, and his illiteracy only exacerbates his struggles. Later, Rio visits Celia's faculty room for the private tutoring she promised. What kind of private tutoring? The room is cluttered with complex textbooks and scrolls. Despite being only 12 years old, Celia has become a respected professor due to her brilliance. Celia is impressed by how quickly Rio grasps arithmetic, a testament to Haruto's college education. Over a cup of tea, Celia inquires about Rio's first day, and he admits it was challenging but spectacular if you disregard the discrimination he faced. The following day, Rio participates in a martial arts class. His solid combat skills catch the instructor's attention, who invites him to a duel. Rio's unconventional stance leads to ridicule from his peers, but the instructor forms a different opinion. Rio draws on Haruto's kendo experience, putting up a good fight. His boldness earns the instructor's respect, who extends an invitation to join the Royal Knights. Rio declines, citing more important matters. Later, Celia finds Rio buried in books, studying for the end-of-term exams. She tells him not to stress too much about grades, but Rio decides to worry anyway. During the exams, Celia administers the test while Rio's classmates struggle. Rio breezes through the questions and, despite being somewhat worse for wear, performs admirably. After the results are posted, Rio tops the school year alongside Christina, a nobleman named Alphonse, who has been stirring up discrimination against Rio, accuses him of cheating. Christina and Rona accept the results, and Celia vouches for Rio's hard work. Alphonse and his cronies dismiss Celia's defense and storm off. Celia congratulates Rio on his excellent exam results, though she worries that the other students might use this against him. Rio is unfazed, confident that with Celia's support, he can weather any storm, and Celia promises to help him in any way she can. 5 years later, a select group of students are chosen to participate in an exhibition tournament. Among them are Alphonse, Stuart, and, to everyone's surprise, Rio. Alphonse protests, arguing that a commoner like Rio shouldn't be chosen for such a prestigious event. The instructor, however, asserts that the decision is final. Celia congratulates Rio and mentions that he might be recruited into the Knights Order if a scout takes an interest in him, but Rio reiterates his intention not to join the Knights Order. Celia enjoys her tea and asks Rio about his plans after graduation. Rio reveals that he plans to go on a journey. Celia is saddened by his intention to leave the country and invites him to stay and work in her laboratory instead. Rio has significantly improved Celia's quality of life just by brewing the perfect cup of tea. He mentions that she'll soon be involved in marriage talks, and it would be inappropriate for a male commoner to work in her laboratory. When Celia asks where he plans to go, Rio shares his desire to visit Yagumo, his mother's homeland. This moment brings Rio to a trance, as he recalls his mother, which worries Celia. A few weeks later, the Royal Exhibition Tournament takes place, presided over by Alfred. Rio is the first challenger, and Alphonse warns him not to embarrass himself. Rio promises not to disappoint, and to Rio's astonishment, his opponent is Charles, the man who had once brutally beaten him. Charles is incredulous that the sewer rat he mistreated is now his opponent. Rio retorts that he owes Charles for their private time, and Alfred notices Rio's unusual stance. Charles is insulted that Rio isn't even using a shield. Initially, the match appears evenly matched, but Charles, fueled by fury and resentment from a demotion, becomes increasingly aggressive. Rio is put on the defensive, causing Celia considerable worry. However, this is part of the instructor's strategy. As Charles makes a bold move, Rio seizes the opportunity to disarm him. Alfred declares Rio the winner, and he will defend his title next week. Charles grudgingly accepts his defeat, while Rio's peers shower him with applause. Charles drowns his frustrations with drinks, while Rice, an ambassador from the Proxia Empire, lifts his spirits. Rice admits that Rio's movements were impressive and recalls that Rio was suspected of Flora's kidnapping 5 years ago. The next day, Celia waits for Rio at the school gate to celebrate his victory. However, she notices him heading behind the school and follows him, only to witness a girl confessing her feelings to him. She clearly needs a hug from her mummy. Celia tries to distract herself from what she witnessed and later finds out about Rio's vague plans after graduation. During a lecture on magic control, Celia demonstrates the use of lightning magic. Alphonse jeers that the lecture is beneath their class and mocks Rio for being incapable of using magic. In response, Celia asks Alphonse and Steward to demonstrate the lightning spell. After seeing their attempts, Celia decides to show them what true magic control over lightning looks like. She shuts the blinds and casts multiple lightning spells simultaneously, making them dance around the room before gently exploding into a shower of light. Although Rio can't use magic formulas like the others, he can recreate spells he sees using his abundant mana. After the lecture, Steward praises Celia, but berates Rio for rizzing up all the female students. Steward tries to intimidate Rio into stopping, but Celia defends Rio's integrity and tells Steward to drop the subject. Later, the class participates in an outdoor practicum exam, with Alphonse acting as the unit commander. They're tasked with traversing the forest and reaching the goal by sundown. Thanks to his father's connections, Alphonse has prepared a secret route to guarantee their success. Rona feels uneasy about this, considering it is cheating, but Christina lets Alphonse do as he pleases. Steward, however, has a plan for Rio, assigning him the role of baggage carrier. Flora offers to help carry some of the luggage, but Rio declines. While navigating the forest, they encounter a troop of goblins. Despite his arrogance, Alphonse shows keen insight as a commander, instructing the vanguard units to physically augment themselves, and together they defeat the goblins. Alphonse catches Rio spacing out and calls for his attention. Hidden behind the trees, Rice is impressed that Rio noticed him and decides to test the boy's skills. Following his father's map, Alphonse and the group reach a dead end at a cliffside. Christina asks Alphonse what he plans to do next, but before he can answer, they are attacked by a trio of orcs. During the attack, Steward is injured and panics, accidentally bumping into Flora, causing her to fall off the cliff. Without hesitation, Rio jumps in and rescues her, sacrificing his own safety and falling down the cliff himself. Alphonse finally manages to organize a defense, and they fend off the orcs, but Rio emerges unscathed from his fall. After the battle, Alphonse tries to investigate what happened. Steward denies bumping into Flora and accuses Rio of pushing her. Disgusted by the situation, Rio decides to leave school and embark on his journey earlier than planned. However, Flora refuses to leave Rio for dead, determined to find him if necessary. Suddenly, they hear a blood-curdling roar as a giant minotaur descends from the skies. Christina's Thunderball spell fails, and Alphonse instructs everyone to use Ice Lance instead, taking command of the battle. However, when his vanguard crumbles under the minotaur's strength, he quickly signals a retreat. Christina and Rona evacuate first, believing Flora has already left, but she stays behind to treat an injured student in the vanguard. The minotaur discovers her, but before it can harm her, Rio appears and cuts off the monster's hand. He tells Flora to retreat while he engages in battle with the monster. Using the power of Odd, Rio is more than a match for the minotaur. When the minotaur shows an opening, Rio seizes the chance and decapitates it. A few students return for Flora, and Rio uses this opportunity to slip away. Rice, who has been observing Rio the entire time, identifies him as a descendant of Yagumo based on his black hair and eyes. Later, Celia is bringing materials to the headmaster when she overhears him talking with Duke Gustave about his son's actions, which caused Rio's disappearance. However, because the kingdom is in a weakened state, they need the nobility more than ever and cannot show weakness, so the headmaster is forced to pin the blame on Rio. Celia anxiously awaits news of Rio, but he shows up instead. Their reunion is brief, and Rio thanks Celia for supporting him all these years, acknowledging that he wouldn't have survived in such a hostile environment without her. He promises to write her letters using the alias Haruto. Bro, that is not an alias, that's straight up your name. The two embrace, and Celia tells him she will eagerly await his letters. As she watches him leave, she reminisces on the time they together. Rio takes one last look at the kingdom before departing for Yagumo. Meanwhile, Gustav brings one of Rio's cloaks to a beastkin assassin named Latifa and instructs her to track him down and kill him. Rio flies out of the gate and, after 3 days of travel, reaches Amund, a market town in the kingdom of Galar. Fortunately, his wanted posters haven't reached this area, allowing him to secure supplies without trouble. He senses someone following him, but dismisses it, thinking he's being paranoid. While wandering the city, a street vendor catches his attention by selling a pasta dish. The vendor claims the dish was introduced by the local ruler, Lot. After eating to regain his strength, Rio is directed to the merchant guild, where there's a food stall right in front of the doors. Inside the guild, Rio meets a receptionist named Lottie, who takes note of his black hair. She assists him in selecting preserved foods for his journey and finds his knowledge of tea intriguing. Before leaving, Rio writes a letter to Celia, informing her that he won't be able to write any more letters once he leaves the region. Lottie sees him off, but another receptionist, Cosette, addresses her as Lot, reminding her that she's currently using an alias. As Rio treks through the forest, he stumbles upon an injured figure on the road. Feeling compelled to help, he approaches, only to be attacked with poison needles. The attacker, Latifa, draws a dagger with the intent to kill Rio, and both are surprised by the other's speed. When Latifa casts a physical enhancement spell, Rio is forced to escalate the fight, switching from his sword to his fists. He manages to snap her out of the air and pin her to the ground, but Latifa reacts hysterically, forcing Rio to cast a weak sleep spell to calm her down. Rio notices the slave collar around her neck and dispels it. Latifa is then revealed to be Indu, the girl who died alongside Rio in the traffic accident. It appears that everyone involved in the accident was reincarnated. Latifa is also the slave of Steward, who forces her to call him older brother, using an obedience collar that subjects her to immense physical pain if she disobeys. When Latifa regains consciousness, she is initially wary and fearful of Rio. But upon realizing that he removed her collar, she begins to cry tears of joy and relief. Rio interrogates her, learning about her association with Steward and confirming that there are likely no more pursuers. After ensuring she no longer intends to harm him, Rio frees her from her bindings. However, Rio warns Latifa that in this region, beastkin like her are often captured and enslaved. He advises her to head east, toward the wilderness, where other demi-humans live. Coincidentally, Rio is also heading in that direction. Though Rio tries to leave Latifa behind, she starts following him. He clarifies that he didn't free her out of kindness, and that traveling with her could be troublesome. Despite her fear of being alone, Latifa offers Rio her slave collar, submitting herself to him. Though she hates being a slave, she dreads solitude even more. Touched by her vulnerability, Rio relents and allows her to accompany him, though he insists she discard the collar. As they journey together, Latifa begins to cry when she has her first real meal in ages. Rio, noticing her exhaustion while crossing harsh terrain, decides to camp early for the night. Meanwhile, Celia receives Rio's letter and, though saddened by the lack of future communication, is glad to know he is alive and well. While camping, Rio is surprised that Latifa is familiar with spaghetti. His suspicion grows that Latifa, like him, is a reincarnated soul. His suspicions are confirmed when he overhears her having a nightmare, crying out about wanting to go back to Tokyo. The next morning, Latifa wakes up first and notices that Rio resembles the boy she saw on the bus. When Rio wakes up, Latifa asks if she can call him Oni-chan, and he agrees, hoping this small comfort will ease her fears. Their journey continues through a variety of harsh landscapes. At one point, Rio spots a large tree in the distance, but oddly enough, Latifa can't see it. Rio concludes that the tree is magically hidden from others. As they camp in the forest, Rio notices that Latifa is suffering from nightmares and uses his powers to ease her distress. When he sees that the campfire outside is dying down, he goes to tend to it and suddenly encounters a wolf that begins to glow with a blinding white light. His vision is taken away, and he finds himself surrounded by 4 demi-human girls. Although the girls are naturally distrustful of humans, Sarah convinces the others to at least hear Rio out. As Rio tries to explain his situation, Oria and Alma discover Latifa inside his tent, deeply asleep due to a sleeping spell. Yuzuma, convinced that Rio is guilty of kidnapping one of their own, attacks him. Despite Rio's attempts to explain the misunderstanding, the girls notice him using some form of spirit art. Alma uses an earth spell to restrain his movements, and Yuzuma tastes him unconscious. Rio enters a dreamlike state where he meets the mysterious woman who taught him how to use the magical power known as Odd that flows through his veins. Though their time together is brief, she hopes that Rio at least has sweet dreams. When Rio wakes up, he finds himself in shackles. Latifa runs into the room, relieved to see him awake, and angrily confronts the 4 girls, demanding to know if they were the ones who hurt him. One of the village heads, Ursula, enters and apologizes for the mistreatment Rio suffered. Yazuma and the other girls kneel down and offer their apologies as well. Ursula reassures Rio that the girls will be punished accordingly, and Oria frees him from his shackles. Ursula informs him that the other elders will formally apologize the following morning, but for now, they can only offer him this room. The next morning, Ursula escorts Rio to the Hall of the Elders. On the way, Rio notices the large tree in the distance again. Ursula explains that this is the World Tree, where a mighty spirit named Dras resides. Ordinarily, only those with keen spiritual senses can see it, so Ursula is intrigued by Rio's ability to do so. Rio meets the 2 other elders of the village, Sora, an elf, and Dominic, a dwarf. They apologize for the mistreatment he endured and thank him for freeing one of their own. They offer to grant Rio any desire within their power, but all he asks is that they take in Latifa. Since Latifa seems attached to him, Rio asks if he can stay in the village for a while. The elders unanimously agree, with Dominic even inviting him to marry one of the village girls if he wishes. Lastly, Rio requests to be taught spiritual arts and any other techniques that might be useful for daily life. Suddenly, the village's guardian deity and spirit of the World Tree, Dras, appears in all her glory. She closely inspects Rio and discovers that there is a dormant spirit dwelling within him, which prevents him from casting magic like other humans. Dras takes a closer look inside his body and is surprised to find that the spirit is a human-shaped one. She explains that human-shaped spirits were mostly wiped out during a divine war 1,000 years ago, and that these types of spirits are second class, like Dras herself. This revelation forces the elders to reconsider how they treat Rio, who now holds the same position as a saint or person of similar honor. So they basically realize that he is a Jigachad. Later, Oria brings Rio to his new home, where Latifa and the other girls are already waiting. To his surprise, the village has access to a rice-like food, which they explain originates from the Yagumo region. Rio is further shocked to learn that Oria and the other girls will be living with him from now on. Ursula explains that this is for the best, so that Latifa can form relationships and bonds with people other than him. Rio agrees, and days and weeks pass by in the blink of an eye. Rio spends his time with his new companions, studying spiritual arts and enjoying the simple life in the countryside. A grand spirit festival is held to honor the World Tree, which Rio participates in. Meanwhile, Rice embarks on an unwitting adventure to procure a mysterious egg from deep within a cave. Rice explains that the egg will augment the military strength of his celestial lion brigade. As they fly off with the egg, a massive black creature follows them.